Okay, I'm ready. There's a lot of things to turn on before you start preaching. Well, blessed good morning to all of you. My voice is getting a little bit stronger, but I apologize again, having some allergies and a little bit of laryngitis, so I apologize for my voice. This morning we're going to talk about living in a tough world. There's no doubt as we live in this world, we see there's a lot of people that struggle and have trouble dealing with daily life. And maybe you felt that way. We live in a world that there's anxiety and stress. There's depression and sadness, frustration, grief, fatigue, pessimism. And we can just go on and on and on. But what is the answer? How do people cope with daily lives, especially when it gets tough? How do you survive? Well, I want to look at a passage with you this morning in 2 Kings chapter 1. And we're not going to read that right now. We're going to come back to it. You can kind of glance through that. But I want to use that to make a point with all of us as soon as I get to it. And as you kind of see what that story's about, see as we progress through this lesson, if you can kind of figure out where we're going with that passage. But the Bible makes it very clear that we are living in a tough world. In Revelation 21 and verse 4, it tells us that when we enter into the better world, that world that we are hoping upon, and that we are following Jesus to, in Revelation 21 verse 4 it says, "And God shall wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there shall no longer be any death, there shall no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. The first things have passed away." And these are the things of the world we live in. Things that we mourn because of death and sadness. And there's pain. And yet, we have many people that have found happiness and joy in this world as well. So imagine, if you will, that in this very tough world that you can find happiness and joy, that you can make wonderful memories. Think about how great it will be when we enter into the new heavens and the new earth here described by John, where there aren't those things that make this world so tough. Death, mourning, crying, and pain. And there are other things in this world that make living in it a challenge, make it a struggle for many people. So what I want to do is I want to introduce you to 4 different people this morning. Their pictures and their names have been changed. But I think these are people we all know. I want to introduce you to Ted. There's a picture of Ted here. Ted looks pretty good. Looks like he's strong, secure. But the problem is that inside, Ted doesn't feel comfortable standing out. He doesn't want to say anything that is going to draw attention to himself. And so Ted tends to be a follower. Even if there's something that he doesn't quite agree with, he doesn't want to stand out. And so he's not comfortable with that. And along with that, Ted is uncomfortable in social situations. And yet he knows he has to be in social situations, both for work and just for his life. And I think there's a lot of people like Ted who feel uncomfortable standing out, feel uncomfortable in social situations. And so, how does Ted cope with that? That feeling of uncomfortability? Well, the way Ted has decided to do it is he turns to alcohol. He turns to alcohol to make himself feel more comfortable, to kind of take, as people like to say, to take the edge off. And so, whenever he starts to feel uncomfortable, he turns to alcohol. He takes a drink or two. But here's the problem. Ted started getting into a cycle to where anytime he felt uncomfortable, not just in social situations, but anytime. And then anytime Ted started to feel down or bored or depressed, he turned to alcohol. And so the way Ted coped with it was turning to the drink. But unfortunately, he became dependent on alcohol and became an alcoholic. And so, now Ted has other problems in his life that are starting to affect his life. He keeps turning to alcohol, but things don't seem to get better. Do you know people like Ted? I bet you do. And they get into this vicious cycle where life becomes tough because I don't want to stand out. I don't feel comfortable. And so I want to feel those things. I want help. And so they turn to a vice. Ted turns to alcohol. Now, you can see in that a terrible cycle that a lot of people get themselves into. And it's just a daily struggle to survive. But think about if you go to Ted and you say, Ted, I want to talk to you about Jesus Christ. He's going to help you with your problems. He's going to help you get your life straight. I want to open up the Bible with you. Well, we see the cycle is bad enough, but because of that cycle, what happens? Ted doesn't want to talk about the Bible because he doesn't believe he can live without the alcohol. It becomes his crutch. It becomes that which he needs to survive. And so this vicious cycle becomes a stumbling block for Ted to talk about Jesus Christ or to open up the Bible. Do you know people like Ted? I'm going to introduce you to Stacy. Now, Stacy has a problem with stress and depression. She works at a place where it's very stressful. It's not a great working environment, but she doesn't feel like she could get any other job that will pay her what this job pays her. And so every day she goes and she stresses out, and the stress leads to depression. And it makes life tough. So how does she cope with it? How does she survive in this tough situation? Well, Stacy, to make herself feel better, she has learned to have a good time with her friends. And so when work is over, she each night wants to get together with friends. Well, that sounds good, doesn't it? But here's the problem. Stacy's friends go out drinking and gambling and smoking. And now marijuana is legal, so we add that into Stacy's escape and sleeping around as well. Having all that fun helps Stacy deal with the stress and depression that is in her life. Well, I think again we can see that Stacy is in this vicious cycle that's not going to actually be an answer for her in the long run. It's going to lead to other problems. In fact, it's a very dangerous life that she's living. Now, that aside, what if you go to Stacy? Say, Stacy, I want to talk to you about someone you need in your life. I want to talk to you about Jesus Christ. I want to open up the Word of God and let you read a few things. Well, see, this life that she's living, this cycle that she's in, she's not interested in the Bible because she feels that that would be too big of a life change. She's happy where she is. Yes, she has a stressful job, but she's coping with it with all this fun lifestyle. You see, we always talk about evangelism being difficult, and this is a big reason why it's difficult. People get into these cycles of life trying to survive, trying to cope. And the very cycle they get into makes looking at Jesus Christ and His Word unattractive. I want to introduce you to Jack. Jack has had a very rough childhood. His dad was abusive, though he claimed to be a Christian. Now that Jack's in adulthood, he never feels comfortable around, as Jack puts it, church people, because he associates all church people being like his dad. So as an adult, you can imagine he has all sorts of problems and fears because of the abuse he took. That still haunts him as an adult. So he lives in a very, very challenging life as an adult. So how does he deal with the challenge and the toughness of his life? Well, he turns to drugs and sleeping around to let him escape from reality. Again, we can see that here's Jack trying to survive, trying to find a way to deal with the toughness of life. He's been dealt a tough deck of cards. And so, to survive, he turns to these things. Again, we can see the cycle. But that same cycle becomes a stumbling block if we talk to Jack about Jesus Christ, because he has no desire to come to church first and foremost, because he associates all Christians to be like his father. He just won't let himself see that Christians aren't like that. That there are good and sincere and loving Christians, not like his father. And the second problem is sometimes Jack is so hung out with drugs, he's just not in his right mind to ever come and to be taught about God. I want to ask you, do you know people like Jack? They're all over the world we live in. Let's do one more. I want to introduce you to Lucy. Now, as you look at Lucy, she looks like she's got it going for her, right? She looks a little different than the others. She looks like she's well-dressed and that she's successful and she's kind of a go-getter. She's got that kind of that successful, clean, positive, confident look. Well, what looks like on the outside is not what she feels like on the inside. You see, Lucy inside is very insecure, not very confident in herself. So how does she deal with that feeling of insecurity that makes living life so tough? Well, she tries to make up for her insecurity by being an overachiever. And so Lucy, what? Tries to go to school full time, taking 17, 18-hour units per semester while maintaining a 40-plus hour career. And she has convinced herself if she keeps making these great achievements in life, that will make purpose in her life, that she will be something. That's how she deals with the insecurity. But here's the problem. No human being can keep up with that fast-paced lifestyle. So what does she have to do? She turns to stimulants, drugs, things that will pick her up and give her a boost of energy whenever she starts to feel tired or sleepy or down or depressed. This will keep her fast-paced life going. Again, she's in a vicious cycle. What happens if I come to Lucy and say, Lucy, you need to slow down and you need to consider Jesus Christ in your life? Lucy says to me, I would like to come to church. I just don't have the time. And in fact, how could a boring church service compete with such a fast, on-the-go life? Do you know people like Lucy? All four of these people that I have introduced you to, you know. You've seen. They're the people that are all around us. They all seem very different. They're in different cycles. They have different problems. But what do all four of them have in common? What they have in common is how they deal with the world. They all turn to vices and crutches to get them through the tough daily grind. Things like alcohol, gambling, smoking, drugs, sleeping around. And this is the world we live in. The cycle that they're in, these turning to these vices and these crutches for help, we know is not really a help. We know it's a problem in itself. But it becomes a very stumbling block of them seeking the true answer, which is Jesus Christ. That's why it's so difficult to try to tell people, to talk to people about Jesus Christ. And these type of people, sometimes the only time you may be able to open that door is when all of this comes crashing down, as one day it will. So let's go to 2 Kings chapter 1. See if you can make the connection between what we just talked about and this story. This story is about an evil king named Ahaziah. And Ahaziah has a terrible, tragic fall one day. And he needs some help. Look, if you would, at verse 2. And Ahaziah fell through the lattice in his upper chamber, which was in Samaria, and he became ill. And so he sent messengers, and he said to them, Go inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, whether I will recover from this sickness. But the angel of the Lord said to Elijah the Tishbite, Arise, go up to meet the messengers of the king of Samaria, and say to them, Is it because there is no God in Israel that you're going to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Now, therefore, thus says the Lord, You shall not come down from the bed where you have gone up, but you shall surely die. Then Elijah departed, and the messengers returned. Do you see the connection? Here you have King Ahaziah needs help. He wants to know, am I going to overcome this? Am I going to survive this? So, wanting to know that, where does he go? Where does he turn to get the help? To get what he needs? he turns to Beelzebub, the fake god of Ekron. And God immediately sends the angel of the Lord to Elijah and says, Elijah, you go meet the messengers and you go tell them, I'm upset. I want to ask you, why was God so upset? Was he upset that Ahaziah had fallen? No. Was he upset because Ahaziah wanted to know whether he was going to survive or not? No. He was upset because Ahaziah, king of Israel, didn't turn to Yahweh. Didn't turn to God. He has his messengers tell Ahaziah, why are you going to the god of Ekron? When Israel has a true God. There's other stories of kings upsetting God who got stuck in a situation of warfare. And so instead of going to God, they went down to Egypt and said to Egypt, help us. You see the connection? The people that we're talking about today, the people of the world that struggle with the problems of living in this life, the insecurities, the anxiety, the stress, the depression, the abuse, are people just like Ahaziah, that when they want help, they don't turn to God. They turn to things that cannot deliver them, that does not have the power to know the future, that will not help them in this life, but ruin their life. Not to mention, it will not prepare them for that day they stand before their Creator. Now, we know the answer. The answer is Jesus. And I hope somebody that is like the people we've described, whether they're a follower of Christ, it could be, or one that has not come to Christ, I hope that this lesson will get to them and that they will be persuaded to come and to truly let Jesus be the answer to a tough life. Look at a few passages. Matthew 11, 29, 30. Jesus says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you shall find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my load is light. Now, Jesus is not saying that there's not a yoke to carry. He says, put my yoke on you. He's not saying that there aren't going to be times where it feels heavy. But what he is saying is what my yoke that I put on you is only going to be what God requires of you. I'm going to take away all the stuff that man has put on you that you do not need to carry. I'm going to take off all the stuff you put on yourself. Your insecurities, your anxieties. I'm going to take that off you and I'm going to put the things of God upon you. Look, if you would, at Hebrews 2, verse 18. For since He, Jesus Himself, was tempted in that which He has suffered, He is able to come to the aid of those who are tempted. Jesus can come to the aid of us who are tempted. I'll put it this way. Who are challenged. Who feel the struggle of this world. Who have been abused or people who have felt that they're just bombarded with these false concepts of the world. Look, if you would, at Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15 and 16. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in all things as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore, what? Draw near with confidence to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and may find grace to help in time of need. One of the biggest things is people say, well, Jesus doesn't have time to help help me, or Jesus can't help me. He doesn't understand. And here the Hebrew author is telling this audience he absolutely can understand. He lived in this world just like you did. He was tempted in things all in common like you were. But he conquered them. He conquered them. Matthew 19:26. And looking upon them, Jesus said to them, with men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. Maybe the first step is trusting, having faith that God can do the impossible. What we think is impossible, it's not for God. God can take a broken life and resurrect it. And so as we close, last few minutes here, let's very quickly look at some passages, talk about, well, how can He help? How can Jesus help me survive this tough life? Well, number one, as we already talked about, He can understand. He can sympathize with us. He knows what it's like to live on this world as a human being. He did it. Number two, He helps us. But He helps us when we seek Him out. He's there, He's waiting, but we have to seek Him out. Look, if you would, at Matthew 6 and in verse 33. Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. Jesus said these words, but seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Jesus talking to people that what? Were worried, verse 25. They were filled with anxiety. And He says, don't worry, here's the answer. Don't seek those things. Don't worry about those things. Don't do everything possible to first seek out Jesus Christ, His kingdom, and His righteousness, and you're on the right track. How can I do that? Well, look at what He says. Verse 26, look at the birds of the air. They don't sow, nor gather in barns, and yet your Father feeds them. Are you not worth much more than they? He talks about the lilies of the field and the grass that's here today and gone tomorrow, but God splendidly takes care of them and arrays them with glory. How much more are we valuable than those things? Jesus helps us when we seek Him through prayer. Look, if you would, at Matthew chapter 7 and in verse 7. Here Jesus, amazing, He's talking to what? A group of Jews. Have Jews been praying their whole life? Absolutely. And yet Jesus feels the need to say to them, because something was lacking, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. But He's not done. To convince us that He wants to hear and He wants to answer those who seek Him through prayer. He says, or what man among you who, when his son asks him for a loaf, will give him a stone? No, you're going to give him a loaf of bread. You're going to give him what he asks for. Or verse 10, if he asks for a fish, He will not give him a snake, will He? If then you, being evil, sinful, imperfect, knowing how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father, who is not imperfect but perfect, who is all loving, who is in heaven, give what is good to those who ask Him? Look, if you would, at Matthew 17, verse 20. Matthew 17 and verse 20. And He said to them, because of the littleness of your faith, for truly I say to you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible to you. But this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. He's talking about prayer. He's talking about faith in prayer. And he says, if you truly believe, you can move mountains, not by yourself, but with God through prayer. Jesus can help. He helps when we do our part. That's the thing. There's a part we play. God can work through us when we do what is right. Just look at the story of Joseph. Joseph did not know. Joseph was not told the plan of God, where God said, okay, you're in prison, you got bad luck there, but just hang on and do this and do that, and things will be all right. God didn't come to Joseph. But God worked through Joseph when he was falsely accused, when he was forgotten, when he was betrayed by his brothers. And God could do all of that to bring Joseph where he needed to be because Joseph was willing to do the right thing. Whether he knew God was working or close. And that's what we must do. Jesus can help us if we're willing to live in righteousness. He can help us through knowledge. Look at Romans chapter 8, verse 28. Romans chapter 8. And maybe if you have a marker, mark that. We're going to come back to that. Romans chapter 8, verse 28 right now. Paul writes, and we have knowledge that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. A lot of what we gain from God that helps us in this tough life to survive is knowledge. We can have peace because we know God is there. We can have confidence because we know Jesus has paid the price. We can have blessed assurance because we know it's by grace. You hear a voice outside your house. You think there's an intruder. You think someone's out there. You're fearful. You're scared. You don't know what's going on. You call the police and the police say, we got a car right around the corner. You don't see that car. But based on that knowledge, what? You feel better. You feel there's hope. A lot of what God gives us is simply by trusting and believing what He tells us. Look at, if you would, Ephesians chapter 3, verse 19. Ephesians 3, verse 19. Paul writes these words, and to know the love of Christ, which surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled up to all the fullness of God. Jesus can help us through knowledge. He can help us by, obviously, His love. Let's go back to Romans chapter 8. And just let these words fall upon you. Especially the next time you feel, man, this world is tough. Romans chapter 8, verse 35. Who will separate us from the love of Christ? Will tribulation, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? All the things that make life tough? He says, just as it is written, for your sake we are being put to death all day long. We were considered as sheep to the slaughter. That's how people felt in those days. But look at what he writes, verse 37. But in all things we overwhelmingly conquer through Him who loved us. Not through alcohol, or gambling, or smoking, or sleeping around, or drugs. But we overwhelmingly conquer through Him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created thing will be able to separate us from the love of God which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. And He helps us through the power, His power, and His providence. We don't always see God's providence, maybe not until it's already been done. We may not know what God is doing, what God has planned, or what He's working through, or how He's doing it. We may not see it, but we trust and know God is there. For He's in charge of this world. And just like Mordecai said to Esther, he didn't know. But he says, who knows? Who knows whether you've attained royalty for such a time as this? Who knows? Maybe you're hearing this lesson because God wants you to hear it. God's throwing you a life preserver. Are you going to take hold of it? When life gets tough, where will you turn? Will you turn to the God of Ekron? Or will you turn to God and His Son, Jesus Christ? If we can help you make that decision this morning, won't you let that be known as together we stand and as we sing.